Yeah, we are back. It is the Movement Boss Podcast. I'm Joe Aguirre. That is Karen Ravelis, a.k.a. the Movement Boss. All right, now, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm just, trying to chill out a little bit. Had a little bit of a crazy day, and there was tons of traffic trying to get to you. So
It's funny. You could do two things with the drive home. You can lose your mind as you drive through the traffic, or you can find your happy place and sort of. How do you handle it?
You know what, Joe? I just, I'm really trying to be in that present moment and tell myself, look, I know I'm going to get there. And by me getting upset about it is not going to get me there faster. So I know, we're good. And I know we're gonna get on anyway, so it doesn't matter. And I was.
How do you generally handle being stuck in traffic? Do you generally handle it well? Not knowing, necessarily the other side's outcome. Again, it's just like it's that stress that
I do
affects people daily. And I don't think people think too much about. I've been thinking a lot about this, and I've been a lot more aware of this lately. Put it to you like this, right? So I had a heart attack in October of 2022. Let's just get into this a little bit.
Okay.
Long story short, after, and I'll get into it, but afterwards, my doctor basically told me, you've been eating poorly your whole life. Like it was an accumulation of that. However, I mentioned this on last week's episode. I think you and I both mentioned never broken a bone. I had never, since birth, been in a hospital for anything. I had the flu once. I've had COVID once. I had chicken pox when I was 5. That's the list.
That's really nothing.
That's it. That's been my nothing. I mean, I never really, couple of colds, but nothing to write home about, and so 2022, I'm 47 and I own a business. Interestingly, this happened. It was, I guess, about a year after I joined the networking group.
Okay.
Which I got to tell you, that was a godsend, by the way. Again, not to get off track, but my accountant in 2020 said, you should join this networking group I'm in. And he invited me to their next meeting, and I showed up to it. And I'm still in the group. That's actually how I met Karen. And after the meeting ended, he said, you're about the 12th person I've invited to come to one of these meetings. And you're the only one that showed up. And I said, when my accountant, and he'd been my accountant for like 4 years, when my accountant looks at the numbers and says, do this, I do it.
That's true.
Right. And I mean, he brought me to a group of people that are invested in my business and in Clovercrest Media and everything that I do. And, they're great. It's a great group of people. But as being a small business owner, it's hard because I found you're always just chasing dollars. It's you do a job, a couple of people in the group, Carol Urich, amazing woman. Amazing woman.
She's actually the one who told me to give you. She's the one who put us together.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
see,
she is. I love her.
Carol got me a couple of nice gigs with the Wadsworth and some other things, and it was going great. But after you do the job and the job is over and you get paid, it's like, what's next? What's on the horizon now? And it just was like constant. And I got to pay my bills, right? Sometimes I'm waiting on money to come in, but I'm also, you know what I mean? And it's like, oh my God, this is tough. So I found myself constantly stressed out. And I have a daughter with autism. So there's a lot of extra stuff, especially travel stuff that goes with that. And so just constantly, burning the candle at both ends and not eating well. And all of those things eventually turned into a heart attack.
That's crazy.
And because I had never really had any health issues before, I had this weird thing across my chest and around my right shoulder. And one night I had a real shortness of breath. And I thought maybe like a panic attack.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it was one of those things where I was like crunching numbers, trying to figure out how I was going to keep everything going. And after I, kind of calmed down from it, I splashed water in my face and I just carried on with my day. And 3 weeks later, and it's funny, last week when we were talking with your sister, Cheryl, who's amazing, by the way, I mentioned her when I had my heart attack. It was Thanksgiving Day, was like kind of the day where things really were going south. And because of COVID, we had a catered Thanksgiving here with just us.
Mm-hmm.
And the food was amazing. And I took a couple bites and I was like, I'm not hungry. Maybe I'll eat later. This tastes amazing. It smells great. Right? All these little warning signs going on. And this is, mind you, 3 weeks after it happened. And then in the morning, by morning time, I should say, I couldn't sleep because I couldn't breathe. And I went into the hospital and, found out I had a heart attack. But I think a big part of what eventually overwhelmed me was just the stress.
Yeah, I believe it. I definitely believe it. Stress will get you. It really will. I mean, it manifests in your body one way or another. It could be heart. Some people get, fortunately, sometimes cancer too. I mean, you think about it. It's. I really believe that contributes to it.
Now, funny story. I got to the hospital. My blood pressure was 210/180. And so that's instant admittance. I mean, I'm passing all sorts of people on my way in. And they gave me some drugs. I hate to say this, kids, but drugs are usually the answer. Just kidding. They gave me some drugs, and within like 15 minutes, I was like, oh, I'm good. And they were like, no, the drugs. It's the drugs that are making you. But the doctor came in.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of was asking me what was going on the last couple weeks. And I had been working at a radio station.
Okay.
And it's 40 minutes from here, but it's down 95 in Milford.
Okay, so now we're getting into traffic.
It's an hour drive there and back every time.
Yep.
And I was getting these big old Starbucks iced coffees, and I get a sausage, egg, and cheese. And I would drive there and drink that. And then after I would finish my coffee, they had a soda machine at the radio station, like a fountain. And so I'd go over and I'd fill that thing up with Coke. And I would drink it all the way home. And so I said to the doctor, the last 3 months.
That's what you were doing?
I've done that every day.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
And he was like.
Must have felt like crap, Joe. I mean, aside from the heart attack. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it was awful, but and it just became like a terrible routine. But he goes, no, that's not what caused your heart attack. I'm sure it didn't help. He said, he was like, it's a lifetime of eating like that. Like we could see in your heart that you've been doing bad things and eating wrong for a really long time. Because I also had to ask this question, mostly at my mother's prompting. I got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, COVID vaccine, the blood clot one. Yeah. And then like 6 months later, I had a heart attack. And so, again, I said to the doctor, is there any chance this is related to the COVID vaccine? I've been seeing a lot of these videos. And he was like, no, trust me, your heart. You've been working at this for like 30 years, dude. This is I can see it. I can literally see the buildup of garbage in your heart.
Really?
Yeah, but I asked.
Yes. Do you really think they would tell you the truth, though? That's the thing.
I do. I trust doctors and I trust science. I do. I ask questions. I'm skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know. You got to show me stuff.
Yep.
But, I have a lot of friends who are in science and who are doctors. And I've talked to them extensively, especially during COVID. And they, I matter of fact, I have a friend, I'll tell you, Trisha Miller Shattuck. She's a doctor. She went to Duke. She went to I think Johns Hopkins Medical School. Anyway, she's a biologist or not biologist.
Chemist?
No, maybe it is like a microbiologist or something like that.
Okay.
Anyway, on my Facebook page, we used to get into it a lot about what was going on, COVID, and there were some people that were like, I watched that movie Plandemic. I didn't think it was very good. And it didn't convince me. And my friend was like, listen, and I've known this girl since I was 5 years old. She goes, I see the information every day. It's real. And after a few weeks, if we tell you something different than the week before, it's because that's what the new information is saying to do. We're not getting rich off COVID. That's not true. I mean, again, here we are 5 years later. Do you see like a rush of doctors that own boats and mansions? Because I don't. I still have friends that are scientists who eventually worked on the COVID vaccine. Modest home. They're not rolling in the dough. Again, you should always be asking questions. I think that's good for people. I think it's good to exercise your brain. I play Wordle every day. I play Words with Friends. All those kinds of words. I mean, it's good for your brain. And again, in having a good diet, keeping your stress down. So I think mental health is super important, right? Physical exercise. If you're not doing all of those things together, you're lacking. You're lacking in some area or another.
You don't have to be perfect either. I think sometimes people think maybe all or nothing, like you have to do. But I think if you're consistent most of the time, or if you do get off the wagon, so to speak, you have a plan to kind of get yourself back on it. Because it happens.
I'll tell you, my own medical history, since it's all out there now, I had a doctor for about 10 years. She just left private practice, sadly.
Oh, yeah. I remember you telling me about this.
This woman she's of Pakistani descent. She speaks perfect English. She was born here. Tiny little lady, sharp as a tack. I mean, I see this lady once a year, right? And she recalls everything like I saw her yesterday. She was actually the one that put me on blood pressure medication because she recognized right away that, that was going to become a problem eventually. Worked on my cholesterol and because, and I don't know what it was about this doctor, because I've had doctors, primary care physicians my whole life, and I lie through my freaking teeth to them. You know what I mean? It's like, I was filling out an insurance exam or something, right? It's like, do you smoke or drink? No. Do you eat processed foods? No. It's like I would go to the doctor. How's it going? Yeah, I'm great. Any stress? No. You know what I mean? Just, I would never tell them the truth. And I met this woman, I should just say doctor. I don't know why I keep calling her lady and woman. Best doctor ever. And I just told her everything. I was just like, you know what? You treat me. You should know everything that I do all the time. I even told her she knew all about my wiffle ball. As you know, Karen, I tell everybody about it because I can't help myself. But it was the first time I really ever feel like I took my health super serious, to the point where it was like, if this lady's going to help me and prescribe me medication, she should know really what my diet is, really what I drink, really, whatever else I might be doing. She's got to know all those things so that I'm not counteracting the stuff she's doing to, you know what I mean?
I do know exactly what you mean, and she's going to be in a position to be able to help you better if you
Right.
say something. If you don't say anything, then she won't know, obviously, and she might not think about it as part of when she's talking to you about things. Because remember, it kind of goes back to sometimes there's things that you don't think they're related, but they could be related. So by you leaving out an important detail, because
Right.
maybe you're embarrassed or you just don't want to tell her, it's just might make it a little bit longer for you to get the help that you needed.
Yeah, I mean,
So that's another way to look at it too.
I'm so glad I did, and I'll tell anybody, if you see a doctor, just that's got to be your person, and again, you got to take it seriously, and right. But so the other big thing about her, and I thought this was great, right? I was like, I'm trying not to eat ice cream anymore, and she was like, why would you do that? But just like have it once a week and maybe don't eat the whole thing.
Yeah, well,
reasonable. It's a you have to eat half a pint is good.
But we know this though. That's the thing. Right?
But the idea of the doctor saying,
yeah, but that's
you're
good.
human, right? Yes.
Yeah, that's what my sister tells people too.
Be reasonable. You can't eat healthy every single time, all the time. It's just for some reason humans have weird cravings for garbage. And I guess the idea again is just, I think if you're doing everything in moderation.
Yes, but sometimes, right, it's hard to be moderation, right?
Yes.
Joe, you're Italian, right? Not to poof on Italian.
Oh,
I am too. It's like, I mean,
of course.
Moderation. I don't know. I remember, growing up and, the food and all of that stuff. It's like, there's never moderation. You
my God.
One of anything.
Oh, I was just going to say,
come on. Like we never
you eat a
anything.
big old thing of pasta and meatballs with some Italian bread. And then, you would house that. And then go back, have some more spaghetti, but now take the meatballs and put them in the bread and make it a meatball sandwich.
You'd be full, right? You're like, oh, I'm so full. But meanwhile, the dessert comes out and you're like, oh, I have a little piece of that.
Cannolis. Let's go.
So
no, I get you.
Yeah. I mean, so that's too.
But again, right? If you have a day where, you go a little crazy, maybe tomorrow you have a salad.
Yeah. Or you just.
It's so funny because I do that, Karen, and it actually pisses my wife off. Like we'll go out on a Sunday and go to a fair and eat garbage, and then I'll come home for lunch on Monday, and she works from home, and I'll make a salad.
She'll say, "What's that?" Right?
Yeah, she gets pissed. Like, "Oh, look at you, salad," and I'm like, "No, I'm just
trying to be good."
All right, yeah, I don't know
the damage I was doing, So.
I don't know how much that even would offset, but it feels like I'm putting in the effort, and I think that's all that matters.
There you go.
Yeah. But yeah, no, really, I think the mental health part of it, I'm a fan of therapy. I think therapists are good. I have a best friend who is a licensed therapist. So sometimes he thinks I go over his place to hang out, but it's just to lay all my problems on him. And then we cry. And then I go home.
Nothing wrong with crying.
That's right.
They say crying is like parasympathetic event. Like, remember we talked about that?
Yes.
Parasympathetic and the sympathetics, right? Your body's trying to just relax.
I grew up around a lot of Italian guys who were tough guys who, even if you did something wrong, you got smacked. If you cried, it was like, what's the matter with you? And it's like, well, I don't know. The person I admire most in the world just slapped me in the face. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Other than the physical pain, let's go deeper. You know what I mean?
Well, my father, I'm female. So my father would kind of do that with, what are you crying for? What's the matter with you? Or something like that. Yeah. So we kind of had a little bit of that too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Your look, here's the other thing I think I've learned too. In going to therapy, everybody's got some sort of trauma. Like everybody's had something awful happen in their life. One thing or another. Nobody's life is like smooth sailing. I mean, maybe, but I doubt it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's different variations of it. And I think it's specific to what the person may think, or somebody else could have trauma, real, like what we would maybe call trauma, like seriously, you know, uh, life altering things. And then you could have somebody else that nothing would compare to that, but it could be trauma for them. So I think it just depends on the person. Depends a lot on the person too.
I like with most things that I do, I'm a very analytical person, Like again, my doctor says stop smoking, stop eating garbage, cut back on this, cut back on that if you want to live. And it's like I'm doing all of those things. Yes. Should I have known that all along, Karen? Yeah, obviously. Do I, when the doctor says if you want to live, do those things, done. My accountant says, what would be healthy for your business? Join a networking group so people can help you get business. And so again, I think when you look at the sum of all parts, I think it comes down to just a good balanced approach to all elements of your health. Obviously we talk a lot about breathing, and at the beginning of the show, I was literally talking about how you deal with stress as far as, just sitting in traffic. But
I just try not to, but you are affected by it. Like even this morning, like when I was telling you, earlier, I had to go to New York today. So I drove to New Haven to take Metro North, because sometimes I like to take, Amtrak. I'll go from like where I live there and I just take it straight through. But the time wasn't convenient. So I said, okay, let me just drive up to New Haven. So last night I was looking at the different times, and I was like, oh, I think I'm gonna shoot for this. I'm gonna shoot for the 5:08 train, because that's like a fast one that'll get me there fairly quickly. And then I'm like, you know what? God forbid I miss the 5:08. I'll take the 5:34 because that'll get me in. I had an appointment at 7:15. Okay, so mind you, the 5:08 gets you in about 6:36 a.m. Right? That's the fastest train, and I wanted to be on that train because I figured I'd get in. I'd take my time, walk in, use the bathroom when you get there. And then I said, okay, worst comes to worst, I'll take 5:34. That gets me in at 7:02. That still gives me enough time to get there. But I'm going to have to probably like run or jog to get to the place to make it on time. So I get there, I left the house a little bit later than I had wanted to, but I was like, you know what? I think I still have enough time. So I'm getting there and I'm driving, and I'm seeing on the highway that the highway's closed between exit 17 and 18, that I'm going to have to use an alternate route. So I'm like, shit, I'm like, okay, all right, whatever. I'm like, okay, so I'm probably going to have to take the Merritt. I'm like, no problem. I'll take the Merritt. I really didn't want to, because, it's like pitch black there, because at this time in the morning, it's still dark out. And I'm like, oh God, I hope the Merritt's not closed, because it's in that vicinity. Right. So anyways, I get on the Merritt Parkway. I'm fine. I'm driving. It's a little dark and things, but it wasn't too bad. So I get off. I end up getting off at like Route 22, in North Haven, and it kind of like reroutes me to get back on the highway again, which is fine. So I get back on the highway, go in there, and then all of a sudden I see it's backed up again, like around exit 8. And I'm like, because I got to get off at 1, right? Where the central New Haven is.
Yep.
So I'm just like, oh man, I'm never gonna make it. And I'm like talking to myself. I'm like, you're never gonna make it. You're just not gonna make it. And then I'm like, yeah, but just take the 5:34. You're gonna have to. So it's like, and then it's about going to the bathroom too, because you got to go to the bathroom, right? So I'm like, all right, I didn't have time to go, so I had to wait till I got to New York. But if I missed the 5:08, I would have time to go really quick there, right? So, but by the grace of God, I made the 508, 504, like boom, like run into the train, whatever, the whole thing, got on there. I was happy. So, and then still kind of, I usually go through Penn, but this time, like I said, I was doing Grand Central. And the way I got left off, it kind of threw my bearings a little bit, because usually I was like, oh my God, I'm like thinking to myself, where am I in conjunction now to get out of here?
Mhm.
Right. So, make a long story short, got out of there. I was on time for the appointment, no problem and stuff. But it was all of that, that was just kind of, going through it. But there was nothing you could do about it. But I still had that backup plan, saying to myself, you know what? I thought yesterday, if you missed the 508, you still got that 534 train. So I still had that in the back of my mind, and still just really trying to. But I also use these types of things sometimes, like kind of like as an assessment, like almost on myself sometimes too. Like, wow, if you're really getting that mad about this stuff, or you're like, you can't like control yourself or whatever, like maybe you need to do some more breathing training or something, or you know what I mean? Or just like stuff like that. But, it's just not that big of a deal, like when you really think about it.
Yes.
And I was more concerned of, am I getting myself there safe? And am I paying attention to really what's going around me, and not driving fast and crazy? Because first of all, it's dark out, right? And and there's parts of that highway that don't have lights. So that's kind of like, okay, you really got to watch what you're doing. And you got people like speeding up on you and different things like that, which, knock on wood, wasn't really happening. But that to me is what you have to really kind of like just think about in a way, because life is just too short. Like, is it really worth it, making that one to get yourself so mad just to get there so
sure.
quick? Like, what, to get yourself into an accident or something? Or so
my
it's
daughter
just,
my daughter just started driving,
remember you saying that.
and she's
How's she liking that?
she's 23 and she just started driving. But that's one of the things I pointed out, and I would point it out to obviously any new driver of any age, is that idea, right? Of like, I was with her in the car the other day, and we had to pull out onto this Silas-Deane Highway. So you got to cross 2 lanes to get over to the 2 lanes. And I said to her, go, look, when you're in this spot, you got to pick your spot and go. You've got to 100% decide, I can make it and I'm going, and you don't hesitate. You go and you pull out in the traffic. But I want you to be 100% sure that it's the moment. And if you think you're going to hesitate, then you know what? Wait. Because to your point, is it worth getting into a devastating? And look, if you're going to be a minute late for work, what's 2 minutes or 3?
Well, then
you're late. You're still late. It doesn't make a difference.
You're absolutely right. And if you are kind of doing that, where you're rushing or you're cutting somebody off or whatever the case may be, or the road rage that's, you're having with somebody else, yeah, you're late. But think about how much later you're going to be if you get into an accident, right? Or you have so much road rage that you could potentially have an issue with somebody else on the road. So, you just, we're accountable for ourselves. What can we do to make things better for ourselves, so to speak? It's the things you do most is what's going to kind of dictate your patterns, so to speak. Oh, there's Mr. Chris.
Well, look at us.
Hey.
Look at us.
Good evening.
Got our guest here, that mindful guy, a.k.a. Chris Griffin. Chris, welcome to the Movement Boss Podcast.
Thank you guys for having me.
I got to get myself headphones.
It's so funny, Karen.
I got to get headphones for this because I can never hear the guests.
I
can actually lend you a pair.
Yeah.
What's up, Chris?
I think I the ones that Joe has, the Sony's there.
Those are very nice headphones, aren't they?
They are.
Got to get you a pair.
I know. I got to get a pair to have for this next time somebody comes on. So, Chris, how's it going? We wanted to have you on here because last weekend we had my sister on, who, as you know, is a registered dietitian. And we were talking about the relationship that digestion has on the thoracic diaphragm because of the holes, the hiatuses where the esophagus runs through one of them. And the vagus nerve also runs through the hiatus where the esophagus is. So I thought that this would be perfect to have you on and talk about, the mental health component and different therapies that people could do also in addition. And you can talk about what you have going on now. You have a new place, and that we're going to be doing an open house together. And just some of the other things that you have going on over there with the yoga, the trauma informed yoga, which I think is super important. And so we're happy to have you on.
Yeah, no,
have
it's
people
great
know
to be
about you.
here. Yeah, so my background is in counseling. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I have been for about 12 years. And my journey took me into my own personal journey, actually took me into mindfulness. And I was also using it as a tool to help people in the clinic that I was working at when I first started out about, that 12 years ago. And as I moved into private practice and began working with people, individuals on my own, it became more apparent to me that mindfulness was really helping people and that it could help anybody with anything, right? And, I don't really subscribe necessarily to magic bullets or, right, like cure-alls or anything. But in some ways, mindfulness in its, overreaching form is so important to everything we do, including nutrition, including sleeping, including our mental health, including our physical health, because you can't know if something's going wrong until you're paying attention to it, until you're giving it awareness, which really mindfulness and its very essence, distilled down to its most basic element, is paying attention, being aware. And so when you guys are talking about different forms of wellness, I think everything boils down to first become aware. First know that there's an issue going on. So as I was working with people and starting to realize, wow, this is super helpful in any form of therapy that I'm using. And I'm really grounded in what's called cognitive behavioral therapy, which, as I was coming up in the industry, it still is to a great extent the gold standard of talk therapy. I realized that without mindfulness, a lot of what I was trying to do in CBT was much more difficult. And as I evolved in my own personal career, one of the things that I really wanted to do was stretch out that wellness from just talk therapy. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, like just talk therapy, but it is just one element. I can't meet with somebody for a 50-minute hour once a week and hope that they're going to recover from severe bipolar disorder. It's just not going to happen that way. They need to be highlighting nutrition, movement, whether it's, some people like to go to the gym. Other people like to do Tai Chi. Some people just taking a simple walk. You talk about digestion, talk about sleep patterns. And all of these things really revolve around multiple facets of wellness. And so I was fortunate enough with my wife in this past 2 months to complete a brand new building. She's an orthodontist, so she's a doctor. And when we built this facility, one of my goals was to have a space that would be amenable to wellness practices. So not just having a counseling service, which I had a small group practice called Griffin Counseling Services, which is no longer, because I've moved from that into more of this holistic wellness space. So yes, I do still see a limited number of clients as a counselor, and I've moved into individual coaching and wellness coaching, mindfulness coaching. I kind of like the tab mindful leadership coaching, in terms of people being able to lead their own lives in whatever way they would like to be able to. And the space itself is called the Mindfulness Studio. And as Karen was saying, we are going to offer trauma-informed yoga. I teach meditation classes and workshops. There is also counseling there. I offer counseling. I have another colleague, Patrick, who also is a counselor. And right now I'm recruiting people like Karen, that's how we met, who do all sorts of different forms of wellness. And I want to speak with her sister because nutrition's so important. And that has been a goal of mine now for, I don't know, probably half the time I've been a counselor, for like 6 years. And the space I had just wouldn't accommodate what I really wanted to do. And so having this opportunity with my wife to build this new facility and be able to do exactly what I want to do and recruit people who come from all different forms of healing modalities is just, it's incredible. It's an incredible gift to be able to offer this to people. And I'm just at the very beginning of it, which is crazy because, you know, I've transformed myself several times, right? I just get back in that chrysalis and I bust out again, like over and over again, right? I kind of like go back into a phase where I kind of hunker down and I said, what is it that I really want to do? You know, because I'm always like, I want to be that when I grow up. And now that I'm grown up, I don't stop saying that. I just keep saying that. Oh, well, when I grow up, I want to do this. I want to do that. And hopefully my ADD can like chill and this can be my last career. And and part of that is that it's so diverse and so overarching of so many different disciplines that it keeps me interested, right? As someone who is probably undiagnosed ADHD, it has the ability to keep my attention.
Well, Chris, it seems like it kind of encompasses many of your different passions, like all into one. And oddly enough, earlier in the show, I brought up trauma. So we should definitely talk more about that. And was it trauma informed yoga? You'll have to explain that. That sounds fantastic. I'm a hot yoga guy myself, actually.
Yeah. So I first learned about trauma-informed yoga when I was at a clinic called Walden Behavioral Care, and we worked with clients who were struggling with eating disorders. And they had yoga as one of the components of the treatment there, and it wasn't optional. And so the woman, Amy, we called her Yoga Amy, and she's still a friend of mine. And she was the first trauma-informed yogi that I had ever met. And I kind of was like you, Joe. I was like, well, what does that mean? Because I had just this was my first gig, right out of school. And so I was kind of learning what trauma-informed meant. And as she described it to me, it's really understanding that any of these treatments that we use can trigger somebody's trauma. And also understanding that not everybody understands their trauma or can identify their trauma, which makes it very difficult in a way. As a counselor, I called it the trauma wall, right? Like we would be going great with a client and we would get to a certain point and they would seize up and they would stop. And then they would a lot of times either plateau or they would, revert back to a different stage of recovery. And I called it the trauma wall. And it seemed so difficult to get past the trauma wall. And so what trauma-informed means is you do this at your own rate, your own pace. You tell me what works for you. You tell me what I can and cannot do. And so even as the quote unquote expert, it's your job to do what your client needs you to do. And so with yoga, that might mean if I'm going to reposition you, because some of these poses, asanas, are difficult, I need to ask you very specifically, is it okay if I touch you, or having classes that are purely non-touch, right? You will not be touched in this class. And if you can't do the pose without, assistance or somebody, touching you, then just don't do it, right? No one's going to push you. No one's going to. So, and actually, so the woman who I hired to run my yoga program, Nikki Adams, has been doing this for like 6 or 7 years now. And she could probably describe it in much better terms than I just have. But as far as being trauma informed, I am a trauma informed counselor. And that's what it means to me is, I think, before it was like you pushed people into identifying and describing their trauma. And we know now that that is not the best way to treat trauma. Actually, there's several really helpful ways to treat trauma that have nothing to do with identifying or knowing your trauma, such as EMDR. I do ART, which is accelerated resolution therapy. And these are eye movement desensitization treatments that don't require anybody to retell their story, or because we know that can be re-traumatizing. That can actually hurt. And so one of the trauma-informed things is really sticking to that do no harm. I'm going to do everything I can to help you without re-triggering you into your past traumas, because exposure therapy was and still is one of the gold standards of trauma therapy, but the dropout rates for it are through the roof, right? It is so hard to get somebody through exposure therapy because that literally means exposing people to their trauma. And that also means they can identify it, right? I went through some treatment a couple of years ago, and I got into a kind of an argument, not argument, but another professional when I went to, so I guess I'll tell the story quick. So my therapist retired, and I think every therapist should have a therapist. And so I was like, okay, I got to find someone. I really liked her. And as I was looking, I asked my mentor, Michael Stokes, I said, who's really good out there that works with therapists? Because we need someone with a high BS monitor, because we know what to say and we know what to tell them. We know what they want to hear, right? So you need someone who sees therapists who could be like, come on, like, fess up. You're just trying to like make me happy. And so he sent me to a trauma specialist, which I was like, okay, well, whatever. She's really good. Her name's Deborah Delvecchio Scully, and she is here in Connecticut, and she is one of the foremost experts on trauma. She, really horrible that this even needs to be a thing, but she is an expert on school shootings, and she is called in on a regular basis to go to places where these school shootings happen. She's been all over the country addressing these issues. And so I called her, and like we kind of knew who each other were because I had a small group practice and we're both professionals in Connecticut. It's not very big. And so we got to talking. She gives a free 30-minute consult. And I said, well, I have a really verbal process and I like to really talk out my problems. And she goes, well, that's not what we do. It's like, oh, okay. Right. She goes, we do EMDR and we do brain spotting. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, I guess, that's not really for me. She goes, are you sure about that? She's like, describe your symptoms. I was like, well, sometimes I'll be like dealing with my son and I'll get thrown into a rage. And she was like, that sounds like unresolved trauma to me. I was like, yeah, but I grew up in a very privileged situation, and we had money and I never wanted for anything and blah 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 blah, right? Mm. And then finally, and she goes, Chris, could you just stop talking for a second? As you guys can see, I can really go. And I said, sure. Right? I said, sure. And she said, I think everybody has trauma, and I think you don't know what your trauma is.
Just said that too,
right? Everybody has trauma. I don't think you know what yours is. And I think if you can identify it and you can identify these triggers, you'll be much better off. And I said, hey, I'm a professional. I was supposed to see her talk at a conference once. And instead she was down, I believe down in Florida at a school shooting, right? She'd been called away at the last second, was missing this conference. It was right here in Connecticut. And so I missed her speaking. And I was like, you know what though? I signed up to go to your your talk and I missed it. And you know what? I know how great you are at this. So why would I doubt you? You know, that's one of the things as a professional, I am more than willing to give people professional courtesy when I know that they are owed that. And she said, all right, good. I'm going to assign you to a EMDR therapist. And, you know, it was amazing. It was amazing what we uncovered in a totally different vein of therapy than I was used to or had experienced in my life. And I've been in therapy 3-4 times in my life. And not all of it was because I'm a therapist, because I've only been a therapist for 12 years. So a lot of it was because I was struggling with different things. And man, this was like the best therapy I ever did. And I don't have a therapist anymore. And I don't think I need a therapist anymore. Now, might I? Right? I have elderly parents, right? You know what I mean? Like there's things in life like
Exactly.
that happen and you might need to go back to therapy. But right now, I don't need that therapist on the bench who I call in every once in a while to deal with these outbursts that I was having. And it was amazing. It was really, really amazing. And so I can speak from, you know, both sides of the couch, as they say, to the fact that I had unidentified traumas that were affecting me and my older son in terrible ways. Like we would get along, but man, we just butt heads and just like go at it. If people saw me, they would be like, how are you a therapist? Like you're an insane person. Right. And it was triggers and it had nothing to do with him. It had nothing to do with him. And I kind of knew that, you know, because he's a great kid. He's actually not a tough kid or a bad kid or any things that they say. Right. It was like me having traumas that were triggered by things that he was just doing that were normal kid stuff. And so the power of that unhealed trauma, it's just, and again, we need some of these techniques like EMDR, ART to identify those traumas, because I didn't have any, right? Quote unquote. I didn't have any traumas. Well, yes. And I could see you guys had said, like, obviously had mentioned before, everybody has trauma. There's micro traumas. There's little things that happen that you don't identify as trauma. Sometimes they call it like a lowercase t trauma instead of like we identify trauma as like, I see someone killed in combat. My house gets blown over by a tornado, you know, like big traumas like that we could all recognize are traumatic. Or kind of those societal traumas, 9/11, right? Like everybody was traumatized by that because you never knew, oh my God, am I going to be the next one? Am I going to be on a plane? Am I going to, right? So there's also kind of these larger traumas that affect the entire society in some ways that are like low grade traumas. What's interesting about trauma is if you treat it right away, if you process it almost like immediately within an X amount of time, I can't really tell you how much time, but it's got to be pretty immediate within probably a couple weeks or so. It doesn't turn into PTSD. It doesn't turn into unresolved trauma. They've studied this with combat veterans. If you have properly trained psychologists and psychiatrists on staff and someone sees something horrible during combat and they come back and they can process it pretty immediately with a therapist, with a psychiatrist, they don't get PTSD. They don't come back here and fall into drugs and suicide and so, but we didn't know this until recently, right? So, you know, we were traumatized as kids. Our parents did the best they could, probably, right? Most parents try and do the best they can, and they still traumatize us. And I say it to my kids all the time, I'm so sorry I'm traumatizing you, but at least we know I'm traumatizing you. Maybe we could like work through these before you get to the point where you're with a therapist and saying like, oh, my dad traumatized me so badly. So that's like the long answer to right. Trauma informed is recognizing, I think, like you guys said, everybody has trauma. And how do we dig it up without triggering, without triggering people so that they do, oh, I'm not coming back to therapy. This is terrible. You make me feel awful. I walk out of here feeling awful. I'm not coming back. And trauma-informed yoga is a way to experience our bodies, get back into our bodies. A lot of times, one of the first things we do when we experience trauma is reject the body. We don't want to be inside of our body, right? And mindfulness is like brings us into our body. Yoga with the mindfulness aspects of it brings us into our bodies and allows us to be there, and it allows us to be a safe place again. We talk about like sexual trauma. Man, your body doesn't feel like a very safe place when it's been violated. So a lot of times when we're talking about trauma, yeah, we have to like cleanse this, temple that we have. And we need places to do it that aren't just in a counselor's office, places where we can re-engage with the body with somebody who's experienced, so that if you do get triggered, they know what to do. You're not just gonna, flounder around.
That's why I thought it was so important to get involved with someone who is a mental health practitioner doing the stuff that I do, because I just feel like people would just, like, I feel like they would connect better. They would, they would have things coming from different areas, because you're looking, like, let's just take breathing, for example, right? Somebody who's got anxiety, depression, and they're talking with you and they're getting really good feedback. They're making some really, really good headway. They're feeling really good about themselves. But maybe they have a biomechanical issue with the diaphragm or the obliques on the sides. And that's not addressed. So, like, I think looking at it from that aspect too, in addition to actually doing these therapies with someone who has that scope of practice like yourself, I feel like the person would just be so much better, so much quicker, like, for themselves. Like, I feel like they would just feel better. And we got introduced by Robin. Robin is Dr. Robin Cirillo. She's a clinical psychologist, and she's friends with Chris, and my sister knows her and stuff. She's wonderful. I love her. And
yeah, she's amazing.
She really is. And and I'll tell you how this happened. When I did this pelvic floor class, master's pelvic floor class that I assisted in San Francisco in August, I remember we were having a conversation as a group, and we were talking about, that it did come up that people that had sexual trauma, and, how the therapies that we had, the movement therapies that we would do, and this is non-touch, none of it's touch, it's movement therapy, from my scope. And, I was thinking to myself, I've always had a thing with I've always been very drawn with the breathing and stuff, but the pelvic floor obviously has a relationship with the thoracic diaphragm. And, I knew Robin, and I said to myself, when I get back home, I'm going to send her a text, and I'm going to ask her, talk to her about these things, about this, people that have sexual trauma that are actually processing. I actually have a friend of mine that's doing this now. She's speaking about it. She had something happen to her. She is involved. Her husband does art. She does, like, journaling and things like that. She's somebody I would like you to meet too, as at some point too, Chris. So I was thinking about her, with that. And, like I said, I reached out to Robin, and I talked to her about that. I said, I'd love to have a conversation with you. Maybe there's something that we could do. I feel like people could be helped so much better, between, our therapies aligning, mental health practitioner with someone who has my scope. And she's like, you know what? She's like, I have somebody for you that I think would be a great person for you to talk to. And that's when she gave me your contact information. And I reached out to you, and you and I just kind of got something on the books, and we've had a few conversations together. So far, it's been great. I love what you're doing, and I'm happy to know you, and, really looking forward to, collaborating with you with this, because I think we could really help a lot of people together.
I agree. I think we're onto something. And I think it's going to take us, some time to develop something.
Mm-hmm.
But the best things take a little bit of time to develop. Because I think of, how long did it take before, like, we integrated yoga with therapy? Or how long did it take before we, like, said, oh, like, therapeutic massage, like, things that also can help people to heal. Even just things simple like nutrition, like nobody knew how, like, now that all this new research into the gut and how the gut affects our mood and our behavior, and right, like, it takes a while once right, once you become aware, right, once the awareness is there, sometimes it takes a while to figure out how do these things mesh well. How do these things, how do we present it to people too? Right. In a palatable format, and something that people, I don't necessarily want to do, because I don't know how many people like want to do therapy. And yet it's pretty palatable now. And it's pretty, the stigma for, going to therapy has dropped precipitously just in the 10 to 12 years that I've been doing it. When I first started doing it, I wanted a place where I could practice, where, people could park around the back, and, they could come in one way and leave another way. And like with the younger generations, it's like, they're really open about it. They're, oh, I'm going to see my therapist. Yeah. It's fine. It's not a big
It's
deal.
definitely
Yeah.
become that, Chris. I feel like, it's almost like when I'm talking to people that I work with, that I'm friendly with, and we talk about that kind of stuff. The weird one is the one that doesn't have a therapist, And I like that. I think that's, and I did, earlier today, I in the show, I was talking about the fact that everybody has trauma. It's unfortunate that not everybody recognizes that. Sometimes, again, to your point, your trauma doesn't necessarily have to be, your roommate was murdered when you were in college. It's those things that happen along the way that, and for people, I think, that can identify those things and are able to sort of process that, they probably have an easier time dealing going forward. Obviously, if it's something that's of not a major magnitude. So I'm fascinated by what you're talking about. How could people get in touch with the Mindful Guy?
Sure. So I have 2 websites, because one's not enough, right? So I am actually that
Great.
mindful
Yeah,
guy.
he's great. I
I am thatmindfulguy.com, and I am also themindfulnessstudio.com. Mindfulness Studio, I'm still working on that website, because I'm trying to get a calendar up there with the yoga and events. But if you jump on thatmindfulguy.com, lots of great information on there about me, about the Mindfulness Studio, the upcoming events that we have going on. Karen mentioned the open house on November 10th. It's a Monday from, like 11 to 3. Stop by. Karen will be there. Nikki will be there doing some yoga. My friend Melissa is going to be there doing some different, healing modalities, and a spell bar where you can go make your own spells, right? Like a lot of these interesting kind of like, readings, tarot readings, things like that, things that people don't, again, necessarily, say like, oh, well, that part of wellness. It's like, well, for some people it is. And then hopefully, and I'm still in talks with my friend, Dr. Nancy Greco, about this, is she does lens therapy, which is like a low energy neurofeedback stimulator. So they put little leads on you, and they can actually help to relieve stress, trauma through neurofeedback, and little, just, it's like, well, I'm not going to say, because I don't know. Right. So I just, it's low energy neurotransmitters. It's just, and I've heard great things, not just from her who practices, who's, administers it, but from the people who've done it. And this has the potential to be groundbreaking because it's short. So it just takes a few minutes. And people, get a lot of relief from it. So she hopefully is going to be there doing some lens treatment. And then I'm just looking for more people to come and meet more people. And so we have that physical space too. We are in Vernon, Connecticut. It is 927 Hartford Turnpike. I've started calling it that blue building, because it is obscenely blue and very obvious to see. You can't miss it. Actually, they put our sign up this week too. So the Mindfulness Studios there in big block letters. And if anybody wants to get in touch with me, they can reach me at mindfulguy75@gmail.com, or just send me a message through one of those websites. I'm on Instagram at that mindfulguy75, and the Mindfulness Studio is on Facebook. So I'm just I'm a one-man show. So keeping all that up and running is a full-time job.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure.
Definitely. I'm going to drop, I'll drop that link in the comment section. I definitely will. Because that's usually what we always do too. So
put it in the description even.
definitely.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, Chris, listen, have you been on podcasts before? I would think you have.
Yeah, so I had my own podcast actually.
Oh, I
I
was
had
gonna
a-
say, this guy's
yeah,
you're
yeah.
killer,
I had a podcast called Mindful Matters with my friend Burke for a couple of years, and actually, I have it's still out there. It's still on,
Mhm.
it's on Apple Podcasts and all the formats, and we would just talk about mindfulness stuff. And so I love this. I love this format. It's great. And yeah, so I was so glad when you guys invited me because I hadn't done it in a while, and it always geeks me up.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
we'll
we
definitely
do
have
too.
to,
We
as
love
you
it too.
continue to sort of
Mhm.
build out that mindful
Yeah.
studio, let us know, and we'll continue to
Yeah, put you on.
check in with you, and that'd be awesome. You were fantastic. I really appreciate you coming on with us tonight.
I really enjoyed it, guys. Thank you so much for having
Thank
me.
you so much, Chris. I'll be talking to you soon.
Sounds
Take care.
good.
All right. Have a good one. He's great.
So again, listen, I think it's so important to
Mhm.
have a therapist. I don't know if I've ever told you this real quick, but when I was in the 7th grade, my best friend's father murdered his little sister, and I found out about it on the
Oh, my
news.
goodness.
No, I know, this is insane. And so they brought in like a therapist to meet with, and
Sure.
the lady was wonderful, this wonderful Jewish woman.
Mm.
And I only mention her religion because I was seeing her for 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
and she decided to go on a trip home to Israel. And while there, she died in a bus bombing.
Oh, what?
I
Oh
know.
my God, Joe. That is
I
look
know.
at- Yeah, okay.
I mean,
See,
talk about
yeah.
trauma. And,
Yeah.
obviously, look, I avoided therapy for a very long time because I thought, right, between my best friend's dad being a murderer and my therapist getting murdered, it was like, don't tell anybody anything and don't be
Mm.
close to people. And obviously, as I've gotten older, I have a therapist currently, and I again,
Mhm.
sometimes you just sort of bury things like, oh no, I'm good, and you're not.
Mhm.
And so again,
True.
I tell that story because I think it's important. Again, you don't have to have trauma to that level to have been affected by things. And so to have that objective third party that you can, I just think that's insane. And then to look at some of the stuff that Chris is doing where,
Mhm.
you're kind of doing it on another level. I think, the first step, again, to Chris's point, awareness, can I go talk to somebody and just, even if it's one session, just, hey, how am I doing mentally?
Yeah,
Again, we talk so much about the breathing and the movement and
that's awareness.
maintain a exercise. Your sister
Mhm.
was amazing last week as well. Cheryl
Mhm.
was talking all about the dietary stuff, and we're learning and we're going to learn together. And so another fantastic episode in the books.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes,
Yeah.
tell them how they can get a free assessment from you.
Oh, for me? Well, they can always go into revoltandmove.com/get-started and answer those couple questions, and I'll get an email and I'll reach out to you.
It's funny too. I think sort of along Chris's lines is, these things aren't for life. These are people that want to help you sort of help yourself too. And it's a big part of what Karen does is, it's like we don't want to see you be reliant on anything or anyone. Be able to position yourself to maximize your health. And that, again, includes all of those things. So we're going to continue to dive in and have great guests like Chris Griffin, that mindful guy. Again, you'll find all that info as well as Karen's in the comment section, and we'll also get it in the description. That's going to do it for this week. Another good episode.
Yeah, another one. Episode 6.
Plus another great guest. My goodness. All right. For Karen Ravelese, I'm Joe McGuire. Thank you so much for listening and or watching. We'll catch you next week on the Movement Boss Podcast.
Night, everyone.